okay, how do I get into riding? When I was like 17, I was very interested in getting a bike. I looked into it. I went to some shops and sat on plenty of bikes, and I decided I really wanted a Nighthawk 750. I just liked the way it looked. I just liked it. So, you know, I didn't actually literally get to the point where I was ready to buy one, but I was very interested, and I thought about it a lot. So I let that desire kind of die out, just because I knew I could not afford it. But I did take the MSF course at that time, and that was really cool. I mean, gosh, if any of you guys haven't got a bike but you're thinking about it, take that course. I mean, it is so worth it, just to expose you to a motorcycle. And just, you know, some people, like, there were people there who had gone out and bought a brand new motorcycle before they had ever ridden. I mean, that's not a good idea. It's just not, because some of those people basically discovered over that weekend that motorcycling isn't for them. Anyway, I'll move on. So I took the course. I rode a Nighthawk 250 in the course. Yeah, it's a great bike to just, you know, get familiar with shifting gears on a bike. I've driven a stick shift for my whole life, so I don't, or, you know, since I've been driving, I learned on a stick shift car, or my truck, which I still drive now, actually. And so I'm very, very comfortable with the clutch and shifting gears manually, but having everything switched around, literally, like everything's in a different place, you know, on a motorcycle. Your left foot is shifting gears instead of your right hand. Your right hand has got the gas instead of your right foot. Your left foot has got the gears instead of the clutch, and it, you know, it's just all flipped around. So yeah, but that was a good bike to kind of get the feel for it. So after that, I just let it lie. I didn't pursue getting a motorcycle after that point. I just focused on school and other stuff, or you know, airplanes. And I came out here to Texas to work. This was at the beginning of 2010, and I just, for some reason, I don't even know what it was, like, nothing seemed to spur it, but it just, all of a sudden, the idea just popped back into my head, like, I want to get a bike, just for no reason at all. It just popped back in my head. And so I started researching. I remembered that the bike that I used to want was the Nighthawk 750. But I looked at everything. I tend to do that. I'll take a long time to approach a decision. I'll really try to, like, dig in and do a lot of research. And I'm okay with, like, tolerating not having something. I can do without. I'm gonna go on this road because it looks cool. I can do without stuff for a long time, if I have my sights set on something better, you know? So anyway, I knew it was a good bike, and it's a decent bike to learn on too. It is a good beginner bike, but still has a fair amount of space to grow. And it's also this one in particular, the 650, is an extremely good touring bike. It doesn't have a bunch of touring features, but it has certain things that really do lend to long distance. And some of those things are, it has a fairly wide seat. You can modify the seat to make it pretty comfortable. Shaft drive is super nice. It has a very tall 6th gear, which mean at 75 miles per hour, I'm doing $5,000, right on the money, which is a bit lower than most other 600-ish 4-cylinders. Usually, they'll be doing a little bit higher RPM at, their top gear isn't quite as tall as this one. The downside is with the shaft drive you cannot change the ratios because you have no sprockets to mess with. But so, man, I'm really tired. I keep going off on tangents. The owner that I bought it from had done some pretty dumb stuff to it, like, I'll explain, but I believe his father owned it pretty recently before that, from what I understand, and his father seems to have taken excellent care of it. I think this kid just didn't take very good care of it, and he did some really stupid stuff to it. One of the things he did was he put a tire on the back that was too big, and it rubbed on the swing arm, and so he's like, oh, I'll fix that. He put 2 washers between, like, on the drive splines. The wheel, like, sits on some splines up against the little gearbox in the back, and he shimmed it. He shimmed the wheel over to the left so that it would quit rubbing on the swing arm to keep his oversized tire on there. What that did is it broke the O-ring loose, or it unseated the O-ring so that there was a large gap where all of the grease that's on those drive splines can escape. And it also means that less of the he cut the surface area of the splines in half, because the contacting surface area. So only a very, very small or half of the splines were actually engaged. So you cut in half that area that's got to take the same amount of power, and you rob it of all of its lubrication. That equals pretty significant wear on those parts. So anyway, stupid thing number one. The other thing he did was he put car oil. He did the final oil change with automotive oil, which, some people are probably up in arms, but I don't think that really hurts the engine. I think it's fine for the engine. But what it did was it contaminated the clutch plates, and so when I would, at a certain power level, the clutch would let go. At about 8,000 RPM, the engine's putting out enough power where the clutch just can't handle it, and it would just let go, And so that was another thing. And then also he cleverly hid a leaking fork seal, which actually, if I had my list down of things to look for when I went to get the bike, I would have caught it, but it had a leaky fork seal, which is not really a big deal in and of itself, but if you let a fork seal go and leak, it often runs down and gets into the brake pads, and just the brake pads are shot once they get brake fluid in them, or fork oil in them, or any kind of oil. They're just, you can't, once you get oil in them, like saturated in them, they're shot. And so because the brake pad had been contaminated for so long, and he'd been riding it like that, I don't think it was that long, but anyway, it had worn pretty severe grooves in the rotor. So anyway, long story short, so short of a couple little stupid things he'd done to it, it was in excellent shape, really good mechanical shape. Carbs were super clean, still are really clean. Man, it just runs like a champ. It really has. This thing has been super reliable for over 30,000 miles. Yeah. And I paid $1,000 for it. So this thing has paid for itself 2 or 3 times in gas savings over driving my truck. And another thing about this bike over, say, a 600 sport bike is the insurance is very cheap on this bike. Yeah. So, good old Nighthawk 650. It's kind of heavy and clunky compared to, and clumsy compared to a sport bike, but it's not as bad as a cruiser would be. I like it. So, yeah, so I got this bike and I brought it home and I was super excited. And what I did to kind of learn how to just, I hadn't ridden in like 3 years. So, I had when I went to get this thing, I test drove it like just around the parking lot, basically. He was on an Army base, so we couldn't really leave, or Air Force base, so it wasn't really practical for me to go drive off, and I didn't have my motorcycle license anyway, so I just drove it around the parking lot and at his apartments, and just, you know, I don't listen to it or whatever. And we loaded it up and I took it home, and then like for the next couple days I took it out to a parking lot near where I lived, and just I rode this thing 100 miles in a parking lot over the course of a couple days. You know, you don't really forget how to ride a motorcycle once you have. And another thing is I've ridden bicycles like just like a crazy person for my whole childhood. I rode bikes like all the time. I mean, all the time. So I'm very familiar with the way two wheels handles, and just it's already like ground into my intuition not to grab the front brake on iffy surfaces. You know, that's just from riding bicycles. I already know that, you know. And what happens when you hit sand and deep gravel and gravel on pavement and all that kind of, just the way it feels, you know, to slide. I know that. Now, I don't have the same kind of sense for that sort of thing that somebody who rides dirt bikes would. And that's something I really like to have. I would love to get that feel for the edge of the envelope, in terms of tire grip and that sort of thing. It's much riskier to learn that boundary on a road bike than it is on a dirt bike, like in a field or whatever. Because the consequences are much lower if you... it just freaks me out when people do that sometimes. Alright. Yeah. So, anyway. There's a guy on a bicycle.